Hello friends, we are here in Acts chapter 6 today. Now, in the beginning, I should go back a little bit. In Acts chapter 5, there was the death of Ananias and Sapphira. And I didn't say it yesterday, but I think it's really interesting that, the Holy Spirit basically punished Ananias and Sapphira for lying, and it said there was great fear in the church, but it also said that the church was, because of what happened, the church grew. Now, it doesn't say exactly why it grew, but you might think that that would keep a lot of people away, but the truth is that I think it shows that that the Holy Spirit was really working in these people. And so, it attracted some people. So the church was growing exponentially. And there was something that was happening. It was mentioned that people kept on giving money. And so as we enter this chapter here, it's very important to note that something that made the Christians different from the other people in this area is that the Christians were giving their money away freely to widows and orphans, widows in particular. And back in this culture before, if you were a widow, it could very easily be a death sentence. If you don't have people around to provide food for you, you won't be able to eat. But within Christianity, everybody wasn't looking out for themselves. Everybody was looking out for each other, and all the widows got all the food that they needed. Now, I think it's interesting, it wasn't a major part of Christ's ministry, but when the Holy Spirit starts working in you, there are certain things that just come about. And feeding widows and orphans is just something that happened. There was a handful of things in the Roman Empire that people would look at that and they'd be like, those Christians, they are different. They don't go to the gladiators, the gladiatorial fights. There are a handful of things that set us apart, and I think that's true today also. Things that the Holy Spirit just says, stay away from that. So what happens here is, I said a minute ago that all the widows got all the food that they needed. But the truth is that the distribution of the food was not going well. There was two groups of Jewish people here. There were the Hebrews. Now, the Hebrews spoke Hebrew, but mainly the language was Aramaic. Jesus and all of his disciples, everything that we read previous in Matthew and everything here in Acts, they're speaking Aramaic. But there was another group that was in the land there, during the festivals, and that came out, and they were called the Hellenists. Now, the word Hellenist comes from Helen of Troy. The idea is that Helen of Troy was an outsider. Her culture was from another place, but she became a Greek. And so they're Greek-speaking people whose culture is from somewhere else. So here in Jerusalem at the time, the Hellenists were all Greek-speaking people. They were kind of like back in their home, native area. They're Greek-speaking Jews, which means that that Jerusalem there is not their home, but they moved back there because that's where the community of Christians are now. So the ones that aren't from the area, they're not getting the food that they need. At least the widows aren't. And so they brought it to the disciples, or the apostles, and they said we're not getting our share, and they said, we don't have time to distribute this. We need to pray for the church, and we need to speak the word. And so they appointed leaders, and it gives a name of them. Interesting thing is, if you read the names, you'll notice that they're all Greek names. The people that they put in charge of the food distribution were all Greeks. That means that there wouldn't be any favoritism. And I think this is a good lesson that we can learn from what's happening here, because at the time, the Hebrew Jews could have kept all the power. The apostles could have said, well, we'll take care of it ourselves, and just kind of micromanaged every part of it. But they're not interested in keeping power. They're not interested in power at all. I think it's interesting that you see the Holy Spirit working in them in this way, just like Jesus said, you shouldn't long to be the greatest. So they're not. So they appoint, and the first one it mentions in the list is Stephen. And Stephen, it turns out, was not just, put in charge of distribution of food, but he was also preaching. But he wasn't preaching to the same crowd. So Peter and James and John and, the other 12, they were primarily speaking to the Hebrew Jews, the Aramaic-speaking Jews. But you had Stephen, and he kind of became the head of the Hellenistic Jews. I should say the Hellenistic Jews weren't putting up with this like the Hebrew Jews were. They didn't like it at all. So they started making up rumors about Stephen in the same way that they made rumors about Jesus. And so they're saying, this guy's saying all these things about it was almost exactly the same thing. They're saying rumors that he's saying wrong things about Moses, and that they're going to change the culture, and that he's going to destroy the temple. And so they kind of take him away, and they ask him to say his piece. And it says in the end of this chapter, and that they all saw that his face was shining like an angel. So I don't know exactly what that means. I don't think it used the word shining, but it said that his face was like an angel. To me, I think that somehow they saw him, and they saw that the Holy Spirit was strongly in him. And it said that earlier in this chapter. It said that the people from all the different areas of the diaspora, it mentions the freedmen, that's like freed slaves, and people from Asia, and mention all these different cities. They said that they started arguing with him, but nobody could beat him in argument because the Spirit was so strong in him. So they have him in trial, and that's the end of the chapter. What the reason that this chapter is kind of short, I would say, is because the next chapter is all just one big sermon that Stephen gave to the people that were basically, it's not really a trial, but they were asking for answers, and they end up stoning him in the next chapter. They throw rocks at him until he dies. And it's a pretty horrible thing. Stephen, it's pretty clear that Stephen was a pretty amazing person. So, well, I think I'll end there. That is Acts chapter 6. Have a great day.